This is the Curious Collector. Welcome. I'm Stuart Holbrook here for another talk and discussion today in the world of collecting that I hope you'll enjoy, called Building Your Brand as a Collector. And we'll get in that in a few minutes. But first of all, just giving you my weekly update as to my location across the wilds of the collecting world. I'm in New Jersey. And I love New Jersey, so it's always a great place to be. It's such a unique and diverse state. I really do enjoy it here, and the collectors have been fabulous. I've been doing this kind of, I call it the Jersey to Pennsylvania shuttle, because I've been back and forth lecturing at doll clubs between New Jersey and Pennsylvania, and have just had a blast, and I'm kind of wrapping it up here now. This is the Curious Collector. Into some other areas of the country. I'm Stuart Holbrook here for another talk and discussion today in the world of collecting that I hope you'll enjoy, called Building Your Brand as a Collector. And we'll get in that in a few minutes. But first of all, just giving you my singular most vibrant to my location across the wilds of the collecting 40 world. Members plus. I'm in really unique collectors and I love New Jersey, so I really enjoyed. It's a great place to be. It's such a unique and diverse state. I really do enjoy it here. And the collectors have been fabulous. I've been doing this kind of, I call it the Jersey to Pennsylvania shuttle, because I've been back and forth lecturing at doll clubs between New Jersey and Pennsylvania, and have just had a blast. Really an incredible place here now, and we'll be moving into some other areas of the country, the town, the community, but not just from the Pennsylvania group. Wow, they were just amazing. Milton Hershey is a big part of that town, but really the whole history of it, and the fact that it was really just a farmland there until Milton Hershey had this singular, most vibrant, a lot of his stories, and I learned the background of what he did. 40 members plus, the school there that has become world-renowned in there, and all the really things I never knew about. A meeting for the first time and some reconnecting that day. One of the members of the club was great. They're a vibrant, active around for an hour before my talk, and I just had an amazing time in Hershey. What an interesting town. So if you're ever in Hershey, get to that Hershey Heritage Center. You're going to love it. Really, and then I did one also in the Lehigh Valley, the history of Hershey, Pennsylvania. That's around the community, but not just from the chocolate. About the closest, obviously, I got to where my parents first started out. Really, the whole Theriault and the auction house, and that's really just eastern Pennsylvania and the Poconos. Until Milton Hershey members had this vision of building a chocolate factory, and a lot of his stories. And I learned running around as an 8-year-old in the auction there that has become world renowned. And it was all the wonderful hearing some of the old stories. And these are the people that I learned that day. One of the members of the club was at Theriault, and remembered the origins, the beginnings up there in the little town of Fleetville where it all started. It was really fun. They introduced me. Get to that Hershey Heritage. It was the funnest introduction I've ever had. And then I did one also in the Lehigh Valley. Basically, this is Stuart Holbrook. We don't know what he's here to talk about, but we do know this. If it's about a carrot, where my parents first started 2 hours with Theriault and the auction house, so we're sure it will be an interesting topic. So a lot of these members of the club, really, they had known me since I was 2 hours about a carrot. Oh, we remember you running around as I think I might have a challenge in the auction. Tammy, what do you think? Should I do a podcast about? It was wonderful hearing some of the old stories, and these are the people that they went. Let's see if I can actually do, but we have to do it for 2 hours. The beginnings up there in the little town of Fleetville where it all started. So they introduced me, and interesting and connecting it. It was the funnest introduction I've ever had. In the sense that the woman said, basically, this is Stuart Holbrook. We don't know what he's here to talk about, but we do know this.
Oh dear!
If it's about a carrot, that series of cloth vegetable 2 hours like talking about that carrot. So we're sure it will be an interesting topic. Broccoli doll. I was thinking to myself, it was a whole series of vegetable people. Could I talk for 2 hours about? See, here we go. So we are going to get right into the subject here today. Tammy, what do you think? Should I do a podcast about? I want to start by saying, first of all,
I'm willing.
Look, I'm not.
Why not? Let's see what you can do. Let's
so
throw
I know
the challenge.
I can actually do, but we have to do it for 2 hours. A company or some sort of consumer-related thing, and it can be many different things. And in the context, interesting and connecting it to collecting more. Call it identity.
I'm sure, Stuart, there are carrot
good way to frame it because everybody kind of understands. Well, wait, there's carrot head dolls. I sold them from that corporate sense.
Okay,
but I'm going to relate it to how you can make it work for you within the world of collect carrot. and that I think a broccoli doll. It was a whole series of developing the way people see you in the world. Here we go. So we are going to all the time right in here about people here today in their local town. They're known as a collector. I want to start by saying, first of all, look, I'm not telling you to build. Everybody in town knows. So I know you instantly think brand is associated to him, a company or some sort of consumer-related person who collects. It can be many different things, and in the context of collectors, all right, and they're known as the carrot. Call it identity, and so everybody is a good way to frame it because everybody kind of understands smaller the power of branding from that particular thing that they collect. To how we mostly talk about dolls here, so we're going to within the world of collecting into that, and that is developing genre. But as I always say, developing the way people see you in the world of collecting. Somebody could you've heard it all the time. You're going to find hear about people useful information in their local town. If you collect baseball cards, or if you collect the baseball cars, or who sports memorabilia, comic books, everything works. Baseball cards are not so different in the sense of this particular subject or the person who collects. Now, you're just talking about carrot dolls. Would you ever build a brand? I want to start by saying that you can build this identity. And so everybody any way you want. There's no identity within scale that you have to smaller local it can circle be very local, particular in the sense that you just try to build your identity. We mostly talk about dolls here, so we're going to be breaking it down local. You can build it within a circle of people that, as I always say, it really have relationships with and socialize with. Or you can build it. You're going to find tidbits. You can build it nationally here across America. You can build it globally all over the world. It's pretty easy these days. Sports memorabilia, comic books, everything works depending on your comfort level different and where you see the need particular subject of building your brand. Now, a brand, what would be the whole reason ever build a brand? And I want to start by saying that you can build this example of the person who becomes known as the doll lady. And there's no very broad scale that you and I'm not talking about building sort of a broad identity in a large scale in the sense that you just try to build your identity to being known in that areas local. You can build it within a circle of people that you know. There's a lot of doll have relationships with and socialize with, or you can build it crowd globally. You can build it nationally or across America. You can build it globally all over the world. By just being known pretty simply easy these days within that it to the level within that hobby, depending on your comfort level and where you see the need to go. You can find some particular niche, and every collector be the whole reason. Typically, what is it? You know, I use the case area that example of currently into that they really like studying, and that's very or they could have multiple areas that building sort of a broad be interconnected in a large scale subject. Because I think that has limitations too. That really mining into a particular subject that people are going to associate with you. You know, there's a lot of, and we'll talk to her in a little bit about it, but like composition dolls is a perfect example of a subcategory that would be definitely much easier to identify and create an identity around versus just within that field, within that hobby of doll collecting. The first thing is, and the most important thing in this is to identify within yourself some particular niche, and every collector has really love a specialty area that they are currently into, know a lot about, really like studying, or they could have multiple areas that across the may world even be interconnected somehow, because these will become the critical subcategory of dolls that is you are going to build still this brand with this particular subject. Well, and we'll go through a number of examples a little bit about it, but like composition dolls to better be able to identify something within your particular hobby. And do keep in mind, I've said before, the road of identifying created identity around versus just broad focus in on one particular very narrow. And the most important thing in this is to identify within yourself for 20 years, 25 years, and they only study them, love Cupies. They only think of themselves branded in the world of Cupies. When I think that there are many areas that are an adjunct to Cupies that you can go into that would also be interesting in study. So just because you build that identity in that one area doesn't mean you can't build an identity in a second area, in a third brand. And as I said, this particular subject, or maybe we'll go through a number of examples of this that I think will help you to better be able to identify something within your particular hobby. And do keep in mind, I said before, the road of a collector should never be straight. I pity collectors who just there are so many one particular is very rewarding narrow topic, multiple levels, but and we'll go through each of these so you can better understand 25 years, and they only study them. cupies. They only think of themselves branded in the world of cupies. When I think that there are many areas that are an adjunct to cupies that you can go into that would also be interesting for a lot of people. Just because you build that identity in that one area doesn't mean you can't build an identity in a second area, in a third area. And as I said, they could be interconnected, and they wanted to share that. They never went into this with the idea that there would be multiple benefits necessarily. It was accidental. So that's kind of interesting, and I'm giving you now the ability to say that there are benefits for you to go into this with. There are so many reasons. They're not going to be very rewarding on it's not going multiple levels, but the why we'll go through each of these so you can better understand that there are a lot of people who have built an identity around a certain category. The first one is, and probably the most obvious, and their own collection as a result of it. You know the old saying, necessarily the motivation for a lot of people who have affinity towards a certain type of genre example of that. Because they really and I can go through and really so many different people who have built identities, and they wanted to share that. They never went into this with the idea that there would ended up getting benefits necessarily. It was offered to them. So that's kind of interesting, and I'm giving you now the ability to say that there are benefits for you to go into this with, many of you know that wrote countless articles and study subjects. It's not going to be all over widespread, particularly French fashions and some other things as well, to the point who have built an identity around a certain category, a person who was an enthusiast within this particular category and field, and their own collection. She was able to, you know, the old saying, if you build it, I know of a collector of Isaiah Walker who perfect example of that. And I can go through and use so many different people who have built identities out for Isaiah Walkers, and in that time frame, ended up getting fabulous, developed a lot of connections of everybody knowing she was known as Isaiah Walker lady. And so she would get Johnston, we often term in our industry, first dibs a lot of articles and study different people who would discover and find original owner Isaiah Walker, particularly French fashions and some other things as well, to the point that people recognized her as a person who was an enthusiast within this particular category. I want to talk for a moment about Ursula Mertz. She was able somebody who has built the ultimate perfect brand in the world of a collector of Isaiah Walker, an identity that has truly amazing. Let me say, first of all, been involved in most of you scouring out the country and searching out her articles, Isaiah Walkers, and in that time frame, in that period, developed a lot of connections. One of the most everybody knowing she was the Isaiah Walker lady out there in the world of so she would get what, interestingly enough, in our industry, an immigrant that came from Germany, and from you would think, who would discover and find original owner Isaiah Walker. She collects able to get primarily American composition dolls. This is where she built her brand. She became known as a collector. I want to talk for a moment about Ursula not too long ago. Here is somebody who has built a fabulous afternoon just talking away, and believe me, I should get her in a podcast. She has built an identity that is truly amazing. Let me say, first of all, she has a million stories, and we were discussing a little bit the why conventions, composition. Well, she did grow up during that without a doubt in Germany. One of the most interesting and 30s, I believe, personalities area was her upbringing there. So it would have been interestingly enough, dolls were she's an immigrant that came from Germany, so there was a bit of nostalgia. You would think, why didn't she ever get into antique dolls? No, she told me when I started primarily American 50 years ago, dolls, and this is where she built her brand. They were beautiful, she said, but it was really a simple thing. I was visiting with Ursula not too long ago, and we spent a fabulous I probably would have collected talking away, and believe me, I should get her in a podcast at some point, finding a subject that I really like, great conversationalist. She has a million stories, childhood, and more importantly, they were something that were affordable to me at the time, and that was American composition during that era. So that's what started it all. In 1930s, I believe, and that expanded her knowledge and learning there. So it would have been started to write articles that she might have related to or contributed to books. There was a bit of everywhere. She's done lectures. But why didn't she ever get into antique over the years? She told me in her 90s, still active, still going to conventions, still sharing her knowledge with the world. Beautiful, and she said, but it was really a simple thing. I would say her personal collection, and so it was built on that brand. She said they were fabulous. I probably would have collected was, but I just combo lady. So I ended up just walking down the road here, unpacking that I really liked. I'm even thinking of different ideas. And she was relating to me the story of, and more importantly, they were something that were affordable to me at the time, and that was American Composition Dolls member. So that's what started it all. At the time, everybody collected. With that, Ursula began so she didn't have knowledge and really learn a lot more about them. Composition. Started to write articles from far away. She letter writing, contributed to books everywhere. She's done lectures, wrote a number of books over the years. She's in her 90s. There's nobody here that collects composition dolls. I have sharing her knowledge with the world, and she is an incredible example. And I will say her personal collection, some other collectors built on that brand. Dolls. It was a small little Ursula was 60 years ago, whenever it was she started. We're kind of just walking down the road here. So she went to UFDC convention and different ideas because she was relating to me the story of in her hometown of Albany. But it was interesting as well. I didn't talk to her about this, but here's a takeaway from this. You can look at her and at the time everybody compositions in Albany, and being she didn't have anyone really to talk to as about composition. She benefited from far away through letter writing and phone calls. She had isolated this one category, and so I'm sure even within her local circle, there's nobody here that collects composition dolls. Everybody knew her to talk to, and she said, "Well, come to UFDC convention." Anything that came through the marketplace in Albany of composition dolls, it was a small owners, whatever that 50, 60 years ago, whenever they probably said, "Oh, I don't really collect." So she went to UFDC convention and she met some other Ursula collectors. She began this process right down the road. But it was interesting as well. I didn't talk to her about this, but here's a takeaway from this. Branding. You can look at making this up as we go along, but there's so many different angles Albany and being the only one there. Hey, Tammy, you're a great example of this as well, because you have a particular subject in the sense that you're becoming very well known for, and I know like Ursula, and so I'm sure even within her local circle of friends, shows how you can get it even narrower. Everybody knew her in your branding and your identity. You started really deep diving through the marketplace in Albany of composition dolls from original owners, whatever that they contacted. But these are the 21-inch portrait models, the original models. I collect German discs.
Right. Well, I started with the little ones, the 14-inch replicas, and I thought these are really cool. And started working on getting all 30 of them, because there's 30 in the series.
We're just making this up as we go along, but there's so many different angles we can discuss in that sense.
What am I doing here
with these? Hey, Tammy, you're a great example
I found out
of this
about
as well, because you have a particular subject that you're becoming very well known for. And I know, like Ursula, you love American compositions,
I've got to see one of these. I've got to get one of these. And so, yeah, then the focus became more on them and on the small ones. Not
you started
really deep diving into
what subject is this? Share with everyone.
The F&B Historical Series from 1939.
But these are the 21-inch portrait models, the original models. And so you started writing about them.
Well, I started with the little ones. I do. 14-inch replicas. I thought,
you have a website about them. You did a lecture at UFDC convention. I know you're planning on writing articles on other subjects as well.
Through researching them and digging and just trying to figure out exactly what am I doing here with these, I found out about
especially with doing UFDC convention lecture and doing the website that anybody
display
who ever Googles something about these, they're going to stumble onto that website, learn from that, and they're going to know you.
So yeah, then the focus became more on them than on the small ones.
So how do you see that benefiting
the small ones? They're beautiful and
I
wonderful.
know you didn't do it for any personal gain necessarily. You did it to share with other people, right?
Display models was just but I've got to tell you the strangest thing that happened.
And so you started writing about them. Did you do a website?
So the website went up. I do. FNBHistoricaldolls.com.
You have a website about them.
It was up for
about 2 years. UFDC
and just about a year ago,
I know you're planning on writing articles on other subjects as well, but you really have created an identity around these dolls that, especially with doing UFDC convention lecture and doing the website, that anybody who ever Googles something about these, they're going to stumble onto that website, learn from that, and they're going to know you.
Basically,
and they're going to think you are the go-to person. So how do you see that benefiting you?
Nobody knew who had designed these dolls. We just had this
personal gain necessarily. You
very
did
vague
24-year-old
girl, possibly of Asian descent. But I've got to tell you the strangest thing that happened as a result of this. So the website went up. It's
one of the things we'll talk about in this. Right now,
and it was up for about 2 years. And just about a year ago, I get an email out of the blue through the website from a woman who says, my mother designed I haven't actually gotten anything, but I thought, this has got a number of collectors. This is just too impossible. Well, it large ones, and they said, when I get ready to sell, she came with me to the UFDC convention. I'm going to give her a call. And talked about her mama. That hookup is there. It just hasn't happened yet. The website
so you can see how this will potentially lead down the road.
And it's not like, and again, I want to say that I don't think anybody does this for that
particular reason.
Very vague, 24-year-old girl, possibly of Asian descent.
If you go down the road and look at all the people who've written books, and all the people who've written articles on a
one
subject,
of the things we'll talk about in this.
I know this historically from my main focus in this later on, that a lot of the takeaway is that were a direct result. It leads to things coming branding. Have you found anything as a result of this?
I haven't actually gotten anything, but
so Tammy gives us a really good lesson in this as well, and how she's done it.
When I get ready to sell,
and also another takeaway from that is, as I said before, you can do it on composition dolls, but you can even narrow it down even more into one particular.
So you can see how this will potentially lead down the road.
Oh, heck yeah.
It's not like, and again, I want to say that I don't think anybody bring your identity out with that particular very niche subject. I mean, Tammy collects a lot of different things. You go down the road and look at all the people who kind of go in on. Tammy, you're going to do other articles on other subjects. They got things. I know this historically from
it's on the Westmore. The Westmore family was like the first family of makeup in classic Hollywood, starting back in the 20s and 30s. And during the war effort, and there were a lot of Westmores, let me make that clear. It's a big family.
Tammy gives us a really good lesson in this as well, and how she's done it.
And
also, another takeaway from that is, as I said before, you can do it on composition dolls, but you can even narrow it down
have really done some digging and found out a lot of information. They're not appearing in books or anything. They've just kind of been in the ether for all these years. And yeah, now I'm fascinated by them. And
I haven't even heard of them.
Just wait.
I mean, Tammy collects a lot of different things.
I know you've mentioned it to me, and I still don't really know what they are.
Go in on. Tammy, are you going to do other articles
narrow as you collect?
Yeah, I don't think one you're working on now, other than as we talked about before.
It's on the Westmore. The Westmore family was like the first family of makeup in
and this article is already
starting back in the 20s and 30s.
And during the war effort,
very soon, and there were a lot of Westmores.
You're talking about Ursula in Germany.
During World War
II,
they started designing
nightclub
dolls
to sell
that originally started out in the 30s for German soldiers.
Recently, maybe in the last year, discovered
the war was over. The Allies took it over and
digging
and found out a lot of information. They're not appearing in books or anything over there. They made dolls in the ether for all these years, and now I'm fascinated by them.
I haven't even heard of them.
Just wait. And these dolls
I know you mentioned it to me, and I still don't really know what they are, so I've got to see this.
Armature
and that's
about
as narrow
dressed
as you can
sometimes
get.
traditionally, sometimes just very fancily, and they were used as table centerpieces, and they were also
I got one more for you.
And a lot of the military guys
article is
already
written,
with
and it's just about to be sent out.
Hopefully it'll appear very soon. Diving into that.
Dolls from
that article is already written and ready to go, and hopefully will appear somewhere very, very shortly.
Nightclub there
that originally started out in the 30s for German soldiers, but after the war was over, the Allies took it over. It had a skating rink. It was the skating rink for the 36 Olympics.
I'm actually making notes,
They made dolls. It was called Casa Carioca.
Yes.
Garnish apart. Not even down. Casa Carioca.
So,
and
yeah, I mean, this is another example of a different thought
cloth armature on wire, dressed sometimes traditionally, sometimes just very fancily, and they were used as table centerpieces, and they were also sold. And a lot of the military guys brought them back home with them. I discovered those about 3 years ago and went deep diving into that. So that article's already written and ready to go, and hopefully will appear somewhere very, very shortly.
I can tell you 20, 25 years ago, you hardly met anybody
that knew
around for dolls.
could identify or cared about.
I always wonder what it is you do while I'm talking, circulating your booth across the country. She was one of the early
I'm actually making notes, Stuart.
Back in, I don't know,
really?
What
we're talking about,
whatever, napping.
Not even
500 of them. 1,000. I don't know where she was finding them all, but she did.
Another example of
there was a very, very narrow group of people into it, but the general population didn't know much about collecting culture around.
And then Nancy wrote
that a lot of people
and then
probably knew nothing about
call it
before.
Nancy, my friend in Kansas,
everybody started
who's a
getting on the back
train and really
years ago
loving and enjoying the subject, and so it ended up creating a market.
Many of you now know what they are, but I can tell you 20, 25 years ago,
here's the other little
met anybody that knew, could identify
in all of this and
about
creating an
that
identity.
were out there
If,
that circulated.
Like
Nancy and like
she was one of the early collectors of them as well.
Buying them back
very,
in,
very
specialized,
70s, 80s, whatever,
sort of
unknown subject.
500
you
of
then
them,
gather your collection, get a number of them all, but she use it as and your so there was a very, very narrow
or even just write an
article,
but the general
you are going to create a larger market for those and then Nancy wrote a
which
book,
will benefit
and then
you
and your collection
later on
should you ever want to to sell
everybody started.
I want to interject.
On the BAPS train.
I don't think anybody
really
does it
loving and enjoying. Nobody said, "Oh, I'm going to write an
ended
article
up creating a market out there for
I just don't see that or hear that.
Here's the other little
in their love of a particular subject, and they just want to share
in all
of
this and creating an identity.
Secret
of
a
benefit that
will
come back to
other
you later on in the regards of your rising
very
of your
specialized
sort of
what are some
unknown
other
reasons
you would do
you
this?
then
Well,
gather
your
collection.
I mean,
get a number
let's
of
face
them.
it. If
Use
all
it
you
as
did
your
was collect stuff
and
book,
put it in
you
your
write that
cabinet,
book,
or even
and
just
look
write an
at
article,
you are
I
going
don't
to
think
create
collecting
a
would
larger
be
market
as
for those
joyous
pieces,
hobby,
which will benefit
as it would
you
be
if
and
you
your
actually
collection
share with
later
other
on,
people.
should
If
you ever want to sell
embark
it.
on this
I want to
educational
interject.
process of
I don't
saying,
think anybody
look
does
at what
it
I'm
for that
collecting.
reason.
Nobody
Here's
said,
its
"Oh, I'm going
story.
to write an article
This
to
is
drive up
really
the values
a fun
of my collection."
exercise to
I
become
just
a
don't see
storyteller
that or hear
in
that.
that particular
Collectors are very
area.
genuine
It's
in
a
their
chance
love
to
of a
assure more
particular subject, and they
understanding
just
and
want to share it.
appreciation
But
of that
there
subject.
is
It's
this
caretaking.
hidden secret
It's
of a
preservation.
benefit that
You
will
are
come back to
assuring
you
that
later
future
on
generations
in the regards
will
of your
come to
rising the
understand
value of your
the
own
backstory.
collection.
So,
and
what
come
are
to
some other
understand
reasons
the importance
you would
of
do
these
this? Well,
particular
it's
items.
fun.
And if we don't have stories,
let's face it.
and you
If
hear me
all you
say
did
this
was
over and over
collect
again
stuff
through every
and put it in
podcast
your
and lecture I
cabinets
do,
and look
if you
at it,
don't tell stories
I don't
about
think
the
collecting
subject
would be
or the
quite
doll
as
or
a
whatever it
joyous
is you
hobby
collect,
as
you
it
are
would
not
be if you actually
reaching
share with
the
other
other
people
people
out there
if you
in any
embark
sort
on
of
this
understanding
educational
of why they
process
are
of saying
important.
the
Look at
visual
what I'm
aesthetic
collecting.
is
Here's
just
its
one
story.
small part.
This is
The
really
story
a fun
is where the gold
exercise
is.
to become
So
a storyteller
that's why
in that
you have an
particular
ability
area.
through
It's a chance
this
to assure more
outreach and through this
understanding and
educational
appreciation of that
process of
subject.
teaching
It's
about
caretaking.
a particular
It's
niche
preservation.
in which you're
You are
developing an
assuring
identity.
that future
You have a
generations
chance
will
to tell the
come to
story
understand
of them and
the
why they
backstory
are
and
important.
come to
So that's
understand
really
the
a
importance
key
of these
element
particular
of a
items. And if we
benefit as
don't
well,
have
and that it really
stories,
is fun,
and you hear me
and
say
you are
this
promoting
over and over
you're
again
becoming
through every
almost a
podcast
virtual
and lecture I
museum
do
to this particular subject,
stories about
virtual
the
in the
subject,
sense if you do
or
it
the
online,
doll,
but
or
you even
whatever
become
it is you
a
collect.
documentary
You are
maker
not
of a
reaching
particular
the
life and
others
story.
out
I know
there
people are doing
in
any
books right
sort of
now
understanding
on
of
Lily
why
Bates
they are
in
important.
Austria,
The visual
and I know
aesthetic
that there's a
is
documentary
just
filmmaker
one
doing it as
small
well.
part.
Again,
The
all of
story
these projects
is where the
help
gold
to
is.
bring better
So
understanding
that's why
of a
you
particular
have an
subject.
ability
Look at where
through
Lily
this
Bates was in the
outreach and
consciousness
through this
of collecting
educational
25
process
years
of
ago
teaching
versus
about
where
a
she is
particular
now.
niche
As we've
in which
uncovered
you're
all of
developing
this
an
information
identity,
about her life,
you have a
and the
chance to
incredible
tell the
doll
story
she made. So
of them
again,
and why
showing
they
us
are
how
important.
the
So that's
stories
really a
really
key
are
element
the
of a
key
benefit as
aspect
well,
of
and that
this,
it really
and your
is
ability
fun.
to tell them
And you are
the most
promoting,
important
and
part
you're becoming
of your
almost
whole
a
collecting
virtual
life
museum
if you are
to
on
this
a
particular subject.
Virtual
In the
I've
sense
talked
that
about
you do
this
it
before,
online,
and
but
I
you
go
even become
really
a
deep into this when I do my
documentary
lectures about
of a
how
particular
the
life
reason
and story.
we
I know
collect
people are
or
doing
why
books
of
right now
collecting
on
really
Lily
centers
Bates
around a
in
certain
Austria,
amount of
and I know that there's a
self-preservation.
documentary
In that,
filmmaker doing it as
we
well.
are
Again, all of
protecting
these
the items
projects
and
help to
by
bring
becoming
better
a steward
understanding
or an
of a
identity
particular
around a
subject and
particular
look at
item.
where
You
Lily
are
Bates
gathering
was in
more
the
protection
consciousness
for
for
that
that
piece
piece
and the
25
work
years
you
ago
do
versus
in
where
that
she is now.
category. But as
we've
well, you're
uncovered
kind of
all of
protecting
this
your
information
own
about her
legacy.
life.
You are
and the
self-preserving
incredible
your
doll she
life.
made. So
long
again,
after
showing us how
we are
the
all
stories really
your
are
story
the key
will continue
aspect
to be
of this,
told,
and your
and your
ability to
identity
tell them
within
the
this
most important
subject
part
will
of
be
your whole collecting
ironclad
life
for
if
generations
you are
as
on
being
a particular
one of the
subject.
go-to people
I've talked
in
about
history
this before,
who
and I go was
really
able deep
to
into this
share
when I do
with
my
others
lectures about
the
how information
the reason
and
we
history
collect
behind
or the why
your
of
particular
collecting
niche,
really
let's call
centers
it,
around a
so
certain
it
amount
is
of
self-preservation. It's a
self-preservation.
way of building a
In
legacy.
that,
I know there's some
we are
people out there that
protecting
say,
the
I don't
items.
want a legacy.
And
I don't
by
care
becoming
about
a
a legacy
steward
or
or
an
an
identity
that may
around
be
a
not
particular
why you're
item.
doing it.
You are
But it
gathering
is a
more
benefit
protection
in that
for
sense,
that
and if
piece and the work
self-preservation
you do
is
in that
truly
category
at the heart
but
of
as
a lot
well,
of
you're kind of
collecting
protecting
and
your own
collectors.
legacy.
This
You
is a
are
way to assure that
your
your
life
life
remembered
long
for
after
generations later
we
on
are all
for the
gone.
work that you did
Your
in uncovering
story
this particular
will
continue to be told in your identity
and this
within this subject will be
ironclad
for generations. You will have through
one
your
of
life
go-to
becoming known as
the person
was able to share with others
is
the information,
original
history behind your.
But there are so many
niche,
other people that are doing this that have
it is self-preservation. It's a way of building a legacy. And I know there's some people out there that say, I don't want a legacy. I don't care about a legacy.
Associated
with that
may be
particular
not
genre.
why you're
Tammy
doing
made
it,
that website,
but it is a benefit in
one
that
of
sense.
the family members, the daughter actually of the original designer, found that
of a lot of
website
collecting
and then contacted
this
Tammy
is a way
to assure that you are remembered
information
for generations later on for the work that was the creator of these dolls. Information that had never been known.
Tammy touched on this.
If you build it, they will come.
It's not just about
the
item
that
you will have through your life.
It could be
becoming
new
groundbreaking
information
that
falls
behind
on your
a
lap.
subject.
And
in
we
Tammy's
case,
it is the portrait original F&B historical dolls.
But there are so
and
many
other
other
people
people
that are doing this that have
new and
unique
out there
research
that no one has ever known in the world.
Bradley,
Justice
because
Yarborough
they
is a friend of mine
associated with
because
that
he's
particular
built
genre.
this great
Tammy
brand
made
and
that
identity
website
around himself.
One of
in the
the
world
family
of
members, the
Barbies
daughter,
that everybody
of the
original
knows
designer
his name.
found
And
that
everybody
website
knows of
and
him
then
as the
contacted
Barbie guy.
Tammy
And
with
Barbie's broad, but
groundbreaking
it's narrow
information
enough that
and
you
research
can
about the
branch
life of her
yourself
mother,
into
who was the
that
creator of
particular
these
category.
dolls.
He's done a great
Information that
job
had never been
in
known.
doing this
Again,
with.
if you
Having
build
a
it,
convention,
they will come.
The only guy I
It's
know
not
who can
just
name a
about
convention after himself.
the items
Bradley
necessarily
God, I love
coming
it.
to
He
you.
does it
could
with
be
honesty.
new,
And
groundbreaking
we all laugh
information
about it.
that
It's
falls
great,
on your
but
lap.
it's Bradley
And we
Con
are
now is
all,
what it's called.
as
He
collectors,
writes articles, he
frustrated
does research
private
projects,
and we
he is
love to
amazing
uncover something
in
new
his
and unique
steadfast
out there
approach
that
of
no one has
really
ever known in the
deep
world.
diving
Bradley
again
Justice
into
Yarborough is a
all
friend
the
of mine.
history
I'm
of
sure
Barbie,
because
not
he's
just
built
this
known
great
history
brand
and
and
identity
relaying
around
that to
himself
people,
in the
finding
world
new
of information
information
that
with
everybody
that, he
here
was
knows
so
his
fortunate
name.
that
And
he
everybody
ended
knows
up
of him
finding
as the
contact
Barbie
with
guy.
And
Ryan,
Barbie's
who is
broad,
the
but it's
daughter
narrow
of
enough
Jack
that you
Ryan, that
can
is
branch
considered to be
into
that particular
what would you call
category.
him?
And he's
The
done a
father,
great
I
job
guess, of
in
Barbie,
doing
which
this.
I think
with
Bradley even
having
wrote
a
an article
convention.
called
The
The
only
Father
guy I
of
know who
Barbie.
can name a
You
convention
think of
after
Ruth Handler
himself.
as the
Bradley
mother.
God,
Well,
I love
Jack
it.
Ryan was
Does
the
it with
engineer
honesty,
and designer,
and
really,
we all
of
laugh
Barbie.
about it. It's great.
And so
But it's
with
Bradley
the daughter
Con now
Anne
is what
managed
it's
to
called.
uncover
He
all
writes
of
articles,
these
he
archival
does
information
research
about his
projects.
career
He is
and time,
amazing.
and also
in
him as a
his
person.
steadfast
And what an
approach of
amazing
really
story it
deep
is,
diving
and
again into
it's really
all
brought
the
out
history
a new
of Barbie,
and not just
understanding
the
of that particular
known history
period
in
and
the
relaying
development
that to
of
people,
Barbie.
finding
And Bradley
new
has done a great
information.
job, and
With
again,
that,
it
he
further
was so
cements his,
fortunate
how
that
would
he
we call
ended
it,
up
his
finding
identity. Again, I guess I'll
contact
just
with
use that word.
Anne Ryan,
And
who
use it,
is
we might
the
as well
daughter
own it.
of
His
Jack
identity
Ryan, that is
of
considered
Barbie,
to be
even though
the
what would you call
so
him?
as we
The
roll down
father,
the
I guess,
list of
Barbie,
why
which I
you
think
would
Bradley
want to
even
build
wrote
a
an article
brand,
called
this
The
one
Father
I
of
think is
Barbie.
really
You think
critical
of
that
Ruth
will
Handler
come
as the
along
mother.
naturally
Well,
over
Jack
time,
Ryan was the
because part
engineer
of
and
building this
designer,
identity
really,
on a
of
particular
Barbie.
subject or
And
many
so
subjects
with the daughter,
is related
Anne
to
managed to
your
uncover
obviously
all of these
understanding
archival
a lot
information
of
about
the
his
deep
career
information
and
deep
time,
history,
and also him
and
as a
also
person,
the
and
nuances
what an
of many
amazing
different
story
items
it is,
possibly produced
and
by
it's
whatever
really
genre
brought out
you're
a
interested
new
in. You know,
Barbie
understanding
as a
of that
example.
particular
So
period
you
in the
come to
development
see
of
nuances.
Barbie, and Bradley
You
has done a
come to
great
see
job. And again, it
unique
further
features
cements
of pieces
his
that
how
other people
it
might
his
not
identity. Again, I
notice.
guess I'll just use
And
that
this
word
is really critical
use it,
in
we
the
might as
sense
well
that
own
the
it.
more you
His
know,
identity
the
of
luckier
Barbie,
you are.
even though
you
collects
will
other things.
absolutely
So as we
stumble
roll
on
down
things
the
that are
list
missed
of
out
why
there
you
because
would want to
people
build
have
a
not
brand,
done that
this one
same
I think
research
is
that you
really
have,
critical that
and you
will
will
come
see a
along
nuance
naturally
that
over
triggers
time.
a desire
Because
for
part
that
of building
piece
this
as a
identity
really
on a
rare
particular
example,
subject or
and
many
it will help
subjects
you build
is
a
related
greater
to your
collection.
obviously
Next up,
understanding
it
a
documents
lot
really
of the
complex
deep
areas
information
of
deep
your
history,
collection
and
that
also the
helps to
nuances of
assure
many
that
different
the
items
history
possibly
is
produced
conveyed
by
on
whatever
I
genre
hate to say
you're
this, but
interested in. You know,
after you're
Barbie
gone.
is a perfect
You know,
example.
a lot
So
of
you come
collectors
to
out
see
there always
nuances.
say, "Oh, I've
You
got to
come
write
to
some
see
things down about
unique
some of these
features of
pieces,
pieces
or
that
I'm
other
afraid my
people
daughter
might
won't remember
not
and
notice.
won't be able to
And
tell
this
the
is
story
really
behind
critical
this
in
doll,
the sense that the
or
more
this
you
item
know
that
the
there's a really
luckier you
unique history
are.
about it,
You will
or it could
absolutely
be things that
stumble on
go with
things
other
that are
things
missed
in your
out there
collection
because people
that
have
you want
not
that story
done that
told
same
as well.
research that
It's
you
endless.
have.
Well,
And
by
you will see a
documenting it
nuance
out there,
that
by
triggers
building
your
a
identity
desire
by
for that
writing
piece,
about it,
as
by
a
sharing
really
it
rare
with others
example,
in the
and it will
collecting
help
world.
you build a
You're
greater
helping to
collection.
assure that
Next
there
up,
is
it
information,
documents
especially
really
in the age of the
complex
internet now,
areas of your
that there is
collection
information that will help protect that piece to assure that the history is conveyed on
and identity.
to say let's tell a story that actually coincides with this theory.
A lot of collectors
of
out
how
there
to
always say, "Oh, I've got to write some things down about generations, and I'm afraid my daughter won't remember and won't be able to tell the story behind this
Recently,
doll, or
I got
this
a collection
item
out
that
of Colorado
really unique
from
history about
great
it,
collector Lori Baker,
things that
many
go
of you
with
might
other
recognize
things in
that
your
name
collection
because she has
that you
spent
want that
her
story
entire
told
collecting
well.
career
It's endless.
writing articles for different publications, by building your identity, by writing about others, by sharing it with others in the collecting world. You're helping to ensure that there is information, especially in the age of the internet, documented that there is information better way to do it than writing a whole article about it in the future. And this in turn has maintaining its history and identity. Things well, let's tell a story that actually coincides with this theory, obviously, but of how to protect your items for future generations and your ability to assure that things are documented properly. Recently, I got a collection out of Colorado from great collector Lori Baker, who many of you might recognize that name, writing an entire article about her entire collecting career, writing articles. Now they're coming up in an auction in a few weeks, so you'll be able to see them. Now, I say a few weeks about certain aspects of her collection that she wants to make sure that the information is 2 years from now you can go back to out there. And what better way to do it than writing a whole article about it? And this in turn has helped her. Now, who is Carrie Hall? Well, Lori did a wonderful research project into her for nothing, obviously, but she was able to then write more articles. Tammy, you call it a seamstress, but I think seamstress is too narrow of a term for this because she was more than that. She was a designer. She was a tailor. She was from a period of time in writing an entire article about the early 1920s. She was one of the people in department stores that women would go to have their dresses made, and this is how you did it. You didn't really have ready to wear as accessible across America, especially in smaller towns. This 2 years from now, you can go back to the auction archives. You went to the local and learn more about tailor designer Carrie Hall. She had an office typically in the department store that you would go meet with her. She would take down your direction. She would have all the latest trends and fashion coming out of Paris. Tammy, you call it a seamstress, design different dresses. I think seamstress is different outings or events or whatever term for this. And she was more than that. She was a designer career at that time until the late 1920s, from a period of time in the 19th century all across the early 1920s. She was one of the people in department stores that women would go to have their dresses made, and this is how you did it that night. You didn't really have ready to wear as accessible across America, especially in smaller towns. You found people like Carrie Hall out of work. You went to the local seamstress, the 1930s designer. She became a noted quilter. She went into quilt store that you would go meet with her. In that process, take down your direction. She would have all the latest trends and even today coming out of Paris. One of the charter members of the quilting hall of different outings or events or whatever thing, but there is. So it was quite a career at that time until the late 1920s and did a great job. Well, during that time, ready to wear came fondly all across America, and it took the nation by storm. And we saw that women over that period just to walk in, buy a dress and be able to wear it that costumes night. In more doll size. I think they would fit, and it kind of like a new thing. And so 20-inch, found people like Carrie Hall. Don't quote me on that. So Carrie reinvented herself in the 1930s, and I love this. She more as a noted quilter. She went into quilt making of the things, and in that process became renowned across the country. Where they ended up, quilts, and is even today now one of the for a lot charter members of the quilting hall of fame. I didn't even know there was such a thing, but there really are fabulous. And so, she was able to reinvent herself in this particular genre and did a great job. Well, during that time, and brought them into her collection, began to research more about the person, wanted to and did a whole article about her favorite designs because it over that period. So she started making, and it's assuring that they stay together and continue to tell the story of Carrie. Kind of like a, and now they're going to be coming to sale, and a new owner will have that story of Carrie. Don't quote me on that. And maybe that story will continue on, and the new collection will then be more as a documentation and create a whole Carrie Hall fascination in the collecting circle where they ended up. So this is an example. Not only did Lori mystery for a lot of collectors out there to possibly be searching, but she wrote articles Carrie Hall designs because they really identity and protect their history. Lori managed as they're being conveyed to the new owners, and now you have an opportunity to take it to the next level. It all snowballs down the road and did a whole article about wonderful this is incredible because it documented developing history and a whole new genre that they stay together and continue to tell the story of Carrie out there. And now they're going to be coming to sale, and a new owner will have that story why you would do this. And maybe that story will continue on earlier. That is important as a reward for your work and diligence in researching and sharing. And I mentioned before that you actually can raise value not only of your particular collection if you already have a lot she wrote articles.
Now, it's not,
but she wrote articles
about
them.
There are moments that you raise the consciousness and understanding of these pieces, so
they're being
you do
to
raise that value. But I want to touch on
one area that it can
be
to take it to the next level.
Sometimes
it all snowballs down the road
that collection,
and it creates
that
this wonderful
really stands
out
in the work that you did in the past and becomes a genre, a culturally important item that everybody in the collecting
on the last
world
point I want to make in the why you would
do
this, I want to go back to
one
doll
we kind of touched on
earlier
that is important
as a
study
for
a great
your
example
work
of this
is
diligence in researching and sharing.
And I mentioned before that you actually can
raise
value.
There was one Steiner in there that
already have a
lot really
of them.
Now it's not
by
always the
case,
generation
there are
of
moments that you
raise
the consciousness and
understanding.
It was
a tiny
pieces.
little
So
C. Steiner
you
that
raise that
value,
but I want to touch on one area that
world.
It was incredible with this
fabulous
hair comb
one
on
item
that wig.
Now,
that collection
this doll has been talked about
really
a lot
stands out in the work that you did in the past and becomes as a result a culturally important item that everybody curious as collecting
world
recognizes
all of these bidders
and buyers wanting it.
And I talked
about
it in the
one doll was a
feature.
It was
emotion,
but it was emotion
study.
directly related.
A great
to
example
of
this
is,
and
I talked about this
on
doll
Steiner's
in a previous
podcast.
It was their go-to
in the Dorothy
years
McGonigal
history
collection we sold.
There was one Steiner in there that
stood out
really
in that book.
loved
and
by
people
an entire
generation
of
collectors.
They dreamed of owning
it.
In her person who bought it said,
it was
I
a tiny little C. Steiner that had
I
the most distinctive wig in the world.
It was incredible with
doll one day.
Fabulous hair
must have that
on that wig.
Now,
this doll has
ended up getting
about a lot in the
it shows you how it can raise awareness and value of a particular genre in a particular collection.
And
so
even
a lot of people
were
different
really
curious
as
your
to
work
what
in your
drove
studies and your
all
writing,
of these
in your sharing
wanting
it.
And I talked about it
it can raise the level of consciousness,
but it was emotion
directly related,
and therefore
drive up the demand
that
book
on
that
Steiner's
item
Dorothy
in
had
itself.
done. It was their
So
go-to
another
for
little
years
benefit
of history
and
of
the why
Steiner.
we would do this.
And
So
that
doll
takes us
stood
to
out in
the
that
how.
book.
And people
How
loved it.
They
dreamed of
this
They
identity.
dreamed of owning
What are
it.
some of
the
the
person who
best
bought it
ways?
said,
Now,
I
we've
looked
touched
at that
on a
book
number
for
of
30
them
years
already,
and I
but
always
let's break
said,
it down and
I
just make
swear
sure
I
we're
want
clear.
to
So
own
obviously,
that doll one day.
you've got to
I
know
must
yourself
have that doll
You
one
really
day.
need
and
to
she ended up getting it.
Very
So it shows you how it can
raise awareness and
years
value
of
research
and
reading and talking to other collectors,
if you use different
examples,
a number of examples
in
in
your
your
studies
studies and your
be
writing,
able to properly
in your sharing across the world of your
all of
collection,
your
it can raise
information
the level
out
of
there
consciousness
to become
for
known
one
as
particular
an expert
and
in that
therefore
particular
drive up
genre
the
or
demand
field.
and the want
So
of that
you want
item
to
in
be
itself.
really well researched.
So another
you don't
little
want to go
benefit
out the
and
door
why we would
liking
do this.
the
So that
objects,
takes
but
us
not
to
knowing enough
the
about them
how.
that you can really
How
talk
do
intelligently
you build
and
this
with clear and
identity?
concise
What are some
information
of the
to
best
be able to
ways?
do it.
Now,
So
we've touched
obviously
on a
the
number
first
of them
step
already,
but let's break it down
gather
and just
your
make
facts.
sure we're
Gather
clear.
your
So
information.
obviously,
Learn
you've got to know your
everything you
subject.
can.
You really
Do research
need to
projects.
have a
If the
very
doll you
clear
love was made in a
background
particular
of years
region
of
in France,
research
go there,
and reading
and study
and
it. Talk
talking
to people
other
in the area who may be
seeing
ancestors of the
a number
maker.
of examples
Anything you
to
can
really
do
be able
to
properly
dig out something
convey
fresh,
all of
something
your
new,
information
something
out there
that
to become known
binds you
as
to
an
that
expert
piece
in that
and to
particular
that
genre or
identity.
field.
So
having
you want to be
information
really well
on a
researched.
particular
You
genre.
don't want to
Just
go
as
out
Tammy
the door
gave an example
liking
earlier
the
that she
objects,
did
but not
with the
knowing
enough
every
about them that you
historical.
can really
With that,
talk
go
intelligently and with
you
clear
now
and concise
have
information to be able
you
to do
have
it. So
knowledge.
obviously the
You
first
have
step
history,
of the how
and
you
you
do it,
may know
gather
things
your
that
facts,
nobody
gather
else
your
does.
information.
It could be a
Learn
subject
everything
that
you
is
can. Do
well
research
collected,
projects.
is well
If
loved,
has been
doll
written
you
about
love
before,
was
but
made
you
in
have
a
something
particular
new.
region
It
in
could
France.
be a
Go
subject
there,
that
and nobody
study
knew
it.
anything
Talk to
about
people in the
before,
area
and
who
you are
may be
uncovering
ancestors
a
of
whole
the
new
maker.
genre or a
Anything
whole
you
new
can
category
do
for
to
people to
dig
research
out
and look
something
and enjoy
fresh,
in their collecting.
something new.
When you've got
something
it
that
and you're ready,
binds you to
that's
that
when you go
piece
forward.
and to
You start
that
writing articles
identity
about it
of
for magazines.
having
You
information
do doll
on a
club
particular genre.
presentations.
You
Just
go
as
local
Tammy
with it
gave
too
an
as well.
example
It doesn't
earlier
have to
that
be
she
national.
did with
Do
the
a little
F&B
presentation
historical.
right in town
With
for your
that,
doll club.
go
It
forward.
doesn't have to be
You
your
now
own doll
have
club. It
information.
can be
You
other
have
people's
knowledge.
doll clubs.
You
it
have
cannot
history.
even be a doll
And you
club.
may know
If it's something
things
that
that
could
nobody
relate,
else
let's say
does.
you're becoming
It
a
could be a
fanatic for
subject
Terry
that
Hall, like we
is
talked about
well
before.
collected,
You can
is
go
well
to
loved,
sewing
has
clubs
been
and
written
do a
about
presentation
before, but
on
you have
the
something
life
new.
of Terry
It
Hall.
could be a
Go to
subject
all
that
these different
nobody
places
knew anything about
out make these connections. You are uncovering a whole new genre or a whole new category. Hey, why not make a YouTube video video and enjoy in their collecting. They're so simple to do now. Put it up on YouTube. You've documented it for the world to be able to see. For magazines. Sponsor a local exhibit in your library or historical. You go local with it too as well. It doesn't have to be national. Do a little presentation earlier. Gave a perfect example of how she built that website. Your own doll and more information other people's doll club. And that process. It cannot even be start a Zoom club of other enthusiasts. You can say you're becoming a fanatic for Theriault, this website, and you suddenly have 10 people that emailed you that said, "Hey, I'm a collector of those too. Can you believe it?" And you all start talking, and you realize you've almost formed this little these connections and create these presentations out there. Write these you all get together every couple of months. Why not make a YouTube video? It's easy. They're so simple to do now. Put it up on YouTube. You can start a Facebook You've documented it for the world to be able to see. Sponsor a local exhibit in your library or performing groups in there of particular subjects. Just like Tammy I mentioned earlier gave a perfect example of how she built that website. Build a community. One great example that I really adore out there is you can start a Zoom club of other enthusiasts. You can suddenly that was started by Tanya in Ohio, this website, who's a great collector. You suddenly have 10 people that emailed you that say, "Hey, I'm a collector of those too. Can you believe it?" And you all start talking, and you realize you've almost formed this little club. And it's blossomed. Start thousands of members to the Zoom club that you all get together every couple of months rich content, talk about people sharing their collections, discoveries, and I know that Tanya that you obtained. You can start a brand in this, and she's becoming well known and established as being a significant Simon and How the Collector who performing years before in there a lot of particular subjects no idea who she was. Now she's collectors that they can build a community. One great example that I really adore out there is the Simon and How writing articles in Facebook that was started by Tanya in Ohio. Will build your identity and help you grow, I should say, in this particular Simon field for the reasons that we documented Facebook group that are based on her love of Simon and Halvik about earlier in a few occasions members to the group building your identity lots of research through presentations through writing all of these things will lead to items coming your way. We get that, and I think a lot of you understand it now, even though you probably never did it for that particular reason. Simon and Halvik collector becomes a definite years benefit. Before, so a lot to understand now is how to leverage that as best now she's known across the world. Prepare yourself for it. So Simon and Halvik things that becomes really important all of these in this process, social media, through presentations, as to writing articles, can actually you could even write. If you are a limited all of these budget collector, will build your identity and help you grow in this and appreciate for the reasons that we're finding great categories of which there's millions of them still within doll collecting. In a few examples, how you may want to take building your identity, reflect on whether research, through presentations, through writing all of these things will lead to items coming your way. We get that, and I think a lot of you understand it now, even though you probably never did it for that particular reason. Go for it. There are many people who were limited budget that the thing to understand now is how to leverage that they really couldn't afford, how to prepare yourself for it. So one of the things that becomes really important in this process is in the back keeping it real as to what maybe things will come your way. You have to realize limited budget collector, of which you do presentations and respect you and appreciate UFDC convention and do a seminar, categories of which doesn't mean millions are going to still within doll collecting as an example. I'm going to give you may want to take a moment to reflect on whether a book on they're kind of hoping Theriault may be necessarily the thing that you want to do. Portrait historicals. You're probably saying, but Stuart, I love Theriault, and I get that. And if that's what you want to do, you should go for it. There are many people who were limited budget that wrote great books in the past on subjects you want to be able to afford, but they love research. That ends up happening. So that is a noble, always beneficial if you like a subject that you're kind of hoping that maybe things will come your way. You have to realize the windfalls of being able to buy things that come to you because of presentations done at your doll club. Great example on UFDC convention and do a seminar, that type of thing. It doesn't mean that people are going to then say, and it was really, at a time when I think Schoenhutz were not in the back of your mind or the back of every collector's mind are kind of world as they are today. You probably hope somebody will give you
consciousness of portrait historicals. She was a collector. It was in the wheelhouse of her affordability at that time. So she was able to buy a number of great shown pieces.
They'll come to you to sell because ultimately you want to be able to. So definitely consider that in the process of your identity. That if you want to like a subject in on something, perhaps be able you could leverage and have the windfalls. However, I want to make it clear to you, it is a noble thing as well to just great example on researcher and a writer. And was Carol Corson necessarily aboard those items, and it was really at a time when I think still a wonderful thing that you're doing and going out there and building an identity around something that you are passionate she helped about, raise the whole consciousness really can't afford. So let's focus on a couple of key elements. It was in the wheelhouse and things that you need to kind of think about as she was able to along and trying to knowingly or unknowingly build this identity. If you're doing it unknowingly, well, these won't matter. So definitely consider that in the process of your identity, that in the process that if you were unknowingly building an identity, you know it now. You could actually afford. One thing that I think is really, I want to make it critical, it is a noble thing as well, is trying to keep it a researcher, a little bit and a writer than you might you want to. Necessarily, some people have those items in having a broader focus, a broader still a wonderful thing that you're doing and going out there and building an identity around something that really isn't building an identity. It's too big. Really can't. So you want to drop it down. So let's focus on a couple key elements of this process and things that you need to kind of think about as you are going along and trying to knowingly or unknowingly build this identity. If you're doing it unknowingly, well, these won't matter. Building an identity around maybe I'm helping to some people can and think about if you have significant wealth, you can build that identity through making you know it now and buying up. One thing that I think is really Lucy Morgan as a great example years ago is so many genres of antique dolls a little bit narrower her identity because she was buying now. Some people have succeeded in having a broader coming onto the market. That's one way to do it. As I mentioned before, just calling yourself so you kind of want to narrow it down into building an identity. One particular category. So you want to drop it down budget. Now, and a category that works, but it's really feel I say go even narrower. So French fashions really dig into something, but it's still broad. We use French fashions. You could be, let's say, building an identity around French fashion. But you love Some people can. And well, if you have dig into Romer, start writing articles about build that identity. A great alternative. Start doing research projects on Romer and become Lucy Morgan as a great example years ago. And really so many genres of antique dolls, making your identity known across the world. Everything rare. I think keeping it narrow is key. Another key element in market, and that's one way to do it, but not everyone can. So you kind of want to narrow it down. Research is evolving. One particular category, we are always finding out new things, and we are also finding out that some things we assumed in the past, some a lot of times assumptions French fashions may be okay, and so if but it's still broad, corrected along the way. Let's say you can't afford to look at it, you love Romer, talk about it. Well, why not dig into Romer? Start writing articles about Romer. What I have been teaching start not doing research projects on Romer and become new information. The Romer identity, something new. Embrace that. Share really that go into making your knowledge known. You're not going to believe this. The world found out that what we had been narrow all along was another key element. We now know this is keeping Florence, my mother, who's been researching and cataloging work. Understand that research is tell you that she loves when we are always finding out new things. We are also finding out that some things we assumed in the past, a lot of times assumptions were not correct. And sometimes it can turn into a conversation where you find that humble enough are right at the same time. Talk about it, happen too, and accept it. Often you may find what I have been writing or what I have been teaching may not be in our ability to that there is new information so easily across the internet. Embrace that as well. Share a great example about this. I got to tell this story because it's another Ursula Mertz story that we found out that what we had been thinking all along was incorrect. When I was visiting Ursula, now know this. She was showing my mother, who's one of my favorite catalog dolls ever made, years, is the first to tell you that these dolls, Tammy.
I don't.
No, okay. Hey, well, they're composition dolls, but I want to know. I have some the top of the head information.
Oh, I have
that actually it's not entirely
they're
correct.
Funny.
I now sometimes it can turn into a conversation where you find that whole group of things are right at the same time. I was laughing because that can happen telling her I loved them, and she said, "Well, Stuart, do you know how they were made or why they were made?" Evolving. And I said, "Well, our ability to share information that they were so easily across the internet as well
for orange companies in Florida.
I got to tell this story because it's another Ursula Mertz story that
I
is
did
great.
write that.
Tammy, you ought to love this one.
But then the great composition researcher
when I was visiting
who
Ursula,
friends with for years,
was showing me
one of my
favorite
collaborating
dolls
on
ever
their
made are the amber orange heads. Do you know these dolls, Tammy?
I don't.
What
no.
they were really made
they're
for.
composition
And that
dolls
was
that
they were
have
a promotional
face,
piece,
but the top
for
of the
sure.
head is an orange.
But they were
I have
actually
seen them.
done by
they're
a travel
funny.
agency
I love these. They're
in
just
Florida
happy.
and promoting
And
travel.
so she has
to
a
the
whole
Sunshine
group
State.
of them in her
So
collection. So
I
was
love
laughing
it.
with her about
Wow.
Isn't that
telling her
great?
I loved
Yes.
it. And she said,
And
well, Stuart,
Ursula
do you
said,
know
that's
how they
what
were
I
made
learned.
or
Never
why they
make
were made?
assumptions.
And I
Wait
said,
until
well,
you
I think
actually
I read
have
you
the
wrote
documented
something about
research.
these that
Florence
they
and I
were
argue about this. I
obviously
actually
a
think it's
promotional
okay to
piece
speculate
for
on
orange
some
companies
things
in Florida
to go with
and
assumptions.
she
If you
laughed
don't know
and she
the
said, I did
actual
write that
reason, as
but
long
then
as
the
you
great
call it
composition
that,
researcher
say
who
we
she
don't
was friends
know why,
with for years
but here's
and
a
they worked
possibility.
together,
But Ursula was
collaborating
horrified.
on
I
their
said, it's
discoveries.
okay, but she's laughing
Don
about it,
Carlson,
and she
he
had to correct
actually
herself, and now we
uncovered
know
what
so
they
be
were
humble
really made
enough to
for.
laugh about
And that
it
was
and say,
they were
hey,
a
I'm so
promotional
glad
piece,
that
for
you
sure.
found this
But
new
they were
information. Let's
actually
get it out there and
done
let's
by
make
a
sure it's
travel
shared.
agency
This is a really
in
important
Florida
part of the
and
process
promoting
too, in
travel
building this
to the
identity
Sunshine
because
State.
part of
So
it, you want to build
Oh,
a
I love
positive
it.
identity.
Wow.
Isn't that great?
Yes.
That is
And
joyful.
Ursula said,
and
that's what
so
I learned. Never
being
make
humble
assumptions.
Is a clear
Wait until you actually
asset
have the
in
documented
this process
research.
of
Florence and I argue
respecting
about this.
that
I actually think
research
it's okay
evolves.
to speculate
Next,
on some things.
key element
to go
you
with
got to remember this is a
assumptions
long
if you
game.
don't
You got to
know
play the long
actual
game.
Reason
Don't
as long
think
as you
that just
call
because,
it that,
as I said
that
before, you wrote
you
an
don't
article
know
or
why,
book
but
or on a
here's a
website that the
possibility.
world will
But
rain
Ursula was
items
horrified.
upon
I said,
you,
it's okay,
or
but she's
you will
laughing about it,
instantly
and she had to
transform
correct
yourself
herself,
into
and now we
that
know.
identity.
So be humble
it takes
enough
years
to laugh about
of
it and say,
curating,
hey, I'm so
gardening.
glad
It
that
takes years
you
of
found
work
this new
to
information.
develop that
Let's get it out there
and
and
get
your name out there
shared.
and have
this is a
people
really
know
important part
as
of the
part of
process
the
too,
league of
in building this
experts in this
identity because
particular field.
part of it
But
you want to
great.
build a
You
positive
want it to be a
identity.
long
You want to
game.
build
Collecting
that
is a
joyful.
long game.
And
It should
so
be.
being
humble
absolutely
is a
should be
clear
a
lifetime
asset
endeavor
in
for
this
you.
process
So be
of
patient.
respecting
Take
that
your time.
research,
Build that
evolve.
identity over time.
Next,
be humble.
key element,
grow with it.
you gotta remember
Lastly,
this is a long game.
In this
You gotta
little
play
section
the
on the
long
key
game.
elements
Don't
of
think
how
that
to
just because, as
build
I
this
said
identity,
before, you wrote an article or book
remember
or on a
this.
website that the
You're
world
building
will
an
rain
identity,
items
but
upon
you don't own
or
the
you will
subject.
instantly
You
transform
don't
yourself
own, say,
into
the
that
subject of
identity.
Puree
It takes
or
years
Isana
of
Walker. Nobody
curating,
owns
gardening.
the
It takes
rights
years of
to
work
be
to
the
develop
sole
that
expert
identity
in
and
that
get your
field.
name out
'Cause
there.
remember,
and have
this
people
is nothing
know
that you
as
made,
part of the
nothing that
league of
you
experts
created.
in this particular
It's something
field.
that you
But that's
research,
great.
and
you want
research
it to be a
is
long
something
game.
that
Collecting
everybody
is a
can
long
do,
game.
and
It
people
should
will
be.
find different
It
things than you.
absolutely should
And
be a
take it as an
lifetime
opportunity to
endeavor
share
for
in a
you. So
conversation
be
with other
patient.
people into
Take
the
your
subject,
time
to
build
exchange
that identity
ideas,
over time.
exchange
Be
thoughts.
humble.
It's a wonderful
Grow with it.
process in
Lastly,
collecting. It
in
brings
this
forth
little
community.
section on the
But
key
I want to say
elements
one
of
thing: how to
in
build
this.
this identity.
Always do respect.
Remember this:
those who
you're building an
came
identity
out with the
but you don't
groundbreaking
own
information.
the subject.
That is, did the
You
first
don't own,
research.
say,
so
the subject
always
of
pay
Puree
homage to them.
or
So if you
Isana
become
Walker, nobody
an expert
owns
on a
the
particular
right
subject
to be
in
the
sole
sole dolls,
expert in
remember
that
to
field.
think
'Cause
about
remember,
those who
this is
came
nothing
before,
that you
who
made,
really
nothing
did
that you
open
created.
It's
far
something that you
better
research.
awareness
And
to the
research
subject
is something that
in their books
everybody
or
can
writings
do,
that
and
were
people
the
will find
pioneers,
different
you would
things than
say,
you
of research in a particular
take it as an
subject.
opportunity
So
to share in a
if you are writing
conversation
an
with other
article
people
on
into the
something
subject
particular
to
in
exchange
French dolls,
ideas,
and you know that
exchange
you got a
thoughts.
lot
It's
of that
wonderful
information
process in collecting.
from, say,
It
Francois
brings forth
Timer
community.
and his work
But
and
I
his
want to say
books
one
in the
thing.
past. In this,
Keep in mind
always
that without
do
that
respect
research,
those
you may
who
not be
came
where
out
you are
with the
today in
groundbreaking
your
information.
research.
That is,
so always
did
pay
the first
a level
research.
of respect.
So
Always
always
some
pay
homage to them, if you
So
will,
if you
and
become
credit them
an expert
with
on
the
a
work that they
particular
did years
subject
before
in
you.
French
We are
dolls,
all building
remember to
on
think
each other.
about we are all
Those who
walking
came
each other
before,
down the road
who really
and
did
passing that
open
baton
up
of information,
a far
and we should never
better
forget
awareness
those before
to the
us.
subject subject.
So in
you
their
are an
book
expert
or writing,
you built an identity
that were the pioneers,
humble
you would
enough
say,
within
of
that
research
again
in a particular
to
subject. So
give
if you are writing an article
to
on
those who
something
came
particular
before.
in French
Are there any
dolls, and you know that you
downsides,
got a
though,
lot
to
of that
this?
information
We've
talked about a lot of positives that come out of and his work and his identity, building your brand. But keep in mind, is there a downside that without that research, there are two that I not think of, but they're not today in your research. Certainly not ones that should impede on your homage to them, if you will. And the first one is, remember the work that they did years before you. We are all building identity. You are going to build up the understanding, the recognition, and appreciation and demand for the particular subject, and we should never forget those before us. So you are promoting yourself. You are an expert. Promoting the concept of the particular thing that you have wrapped your identity around. So you are going to build new collectors. And give you are going to create a new market in some cases. Are there any downsides? Or you are going to expand. I mean, we've talked about a lot of positives that come out of this. So with that, identity, building your brand, in some cases, but not always. Is there a downside? In some cases, you might see there are two that I can think of, but they're not significant. You collect them, and you're like, well, wait a minute. Before I wrote all of this information about this subject, I could find them reasonably. Now, remember, they've gone up 5 times in value. Your brand, as you build your identity, you are going to build up the understanding, recognition, are probably remembering with joy the 80s and 90s when a lot of people really didn't know much about, but you are promoting the concept of the particular thing that you have wrapped your identity around. So you are going to build new collectors. You are going to create a new market. So that is a downside. Or you are going to expand in appreciation and an existing market. You spent years doing the research, years doing the work on these, and in that process, but in some cases, you might see prices. So the upside, as we mentioned before, on those, you collect them, and you're like, well, wait a minute. Before I wrote all of this information about this subject, the last thing is I could find them reasonably. Now they've gone up 5 times in value in the age of internet. If you become an expert and build an identity around a subject, probably remembering with joy the 80s and 90s when a lot of these, or is this one of those, or can you help me identify this? And it's not going to be anything related out there in the marketplace for the penalty, I would say, in this being an insider, building an identity. In most cases, I would assume you're going to get a lot of years doing the research, years doing the work on these, and people are going to give your information out to other people and say, oh, call her. She'll probably know, or maybe she'll want to buy them or anything along those lines. And you'll be kissing a lot of frogs along the way. And the last thing is, those are the only two downsides. But as you see, one of them actually has an upside, especially in the age of internet. And the other one become an expert and build an identity around a subject. You about something that a lot of emails from people saying, do I have one of these, or is this one of those, or can you help me identify this? So, and those are going to be anything related. So it's part of the penalty, I would say, in this being an insider, building an identity to build your collection, build your knowledge, going to get a lot of questions, share it with others, emails, and text messages, and people are going to give your information out to other people and say, oh, call her, she'll probably know, or maybe she'll want to buy them, or anything along those lines, and you'll be kissing a lot of frogs people that you might never have otherwise met. So those are the only two downsides. If you hadn't built that identity, as you see, one of them actually has an upside. It's educational. It's a process. The other keeps one, the mind fresh. Kind of it keeps you younger. Somebody it keeps you pushing you forward with curiosity. Out this is called the curious collector, after all. Curiosity and the willingness to share the things that you have learned because you're curious is absolutely this is how you collect. This is ownership. But it's in your passion. It's this is opportunities pieces to build your collection of their story knowledge. It's the ability for those stories to be told. This is community to the others. This is a chance to meet other like-minded collectors on a particular subject around the world and to break bread with them. And finally, and have self-preservation of people that you might never have otherwise met in your legacy in the world of collecting, in your history. It's educational in this particular process. It keeps the mind fresh. It keeps you younger after you are gone. Forward, generations will look back on the work that you have done and remember you for it. Curiosity and the willingness to share, just like him, things that you have learned because and I will carry on their message absolutely to the next generation and the generation after protection. This is walking each other these pieces down the road, protection of their story. It's the ability for those stories to be told to the others, to gain respect for that item, for respect for that genre that you have been so passionate about for years. And finally, it's self-preservation for you. Self-preservation in your legacy in the world of collecting, in your history in this particular hobby, and the contributions you've made. After you are gone, Generations will look back on the work that you have done and remember you for it and say, just like her, just like him, I love these two, and I will carry on their message to the next generation and the generation after that. This is walking each other down the road of collecting.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of The Curious Collector. The Curious Collector is hosted by Stuart Holbrook and produced by Tammy Trujillo. We invite you to follow us on social media and feel free to leave any questions you have for Stuart on Facebook at Stuart Holbrook-Theriault or follow the Theriault Company Facebook page. And you can stay up to date with the latest auctions and events at Theriaults.com. We'll talk to you on the next episode of The Curious Collector.